Primus Hollings York is, without a question, the most beloved and most fondly remembered leader that the Blessed Order ever had. A young, charismatic man with a great talent as a speaker, a creative innovator who earned with his boldness and idealism the support of many and the love of the people. It was also York who founded one of the most famous and important branches of the Order. New ComStar and the Word of Blake disagree on everything, often just out of principle. But here they agree in their assessment. Both praise York as one of their greatest leaders. A perfect example for the qualities a head of ComStar should have. This all makes the tragic incident that ended his tenure in his life even more ghastly and sad. Right from the get-go, York faced a major crisis. For years, ComStar had hoped to welcome a member of House Kurita into its ranks. Since the time of Karpov, the Order had aimed to win members of all the houses as acolytes, to open new lines of communication, and especially to gain inside information about the state of the houses and its proceedings. By Hollis' time, most houses had already allowed one or even several relatives to take the robe and join up. House Kurita was a big exception. When Mrs. Kurita, sister to coordinator Yugai Kurita, had asked to join ComStar, she was welcomed with open arms. Much to the chagrin of her brother, as it turned out. In multiple communiques and messages, he accused ComStar of interfering in the internal affairs of his house, which Primus York answered by accusing House Kurita of interfering in the internal affairs of ComStar. Nonetheless, the Primus ordered the presenter of Lufien, Stephanie Hendricks, to personally verify and investigate Mrs. Kurita's wish to join ComStar. She underwent an extensive range of ROM tests, but passed all of them. Though pleased that Mrs. actually wished to join ComStar, the Primus was anxious about alienating the coordinator. Despite his fears, he finally approved Mrs. Kurita's appointment as an acolyte. In order to escalate the matter not even further, he offered to not only restrict her positioning to Lufien, but also to keep absolute secrecy about the Kurita defection, so that the coordinator could save face. Sadly, this was to no avail. The new acolyte had just started the training in the ComStar hospice on Lufien when a strike team of ISF agents tried to extract her. However, they were identified by the two ROM agents that Presenter Hendricks had posted as a security detail, and in the following shootout, 4 ISF agents, both ROM agents, and a civilian died. The prodigal daughter of House Kurita was seized and returned to her family. Needless to say that she was kept under tight lockdown, guarded and surveilled by several dozen ISF agents. Primus and First Circuit now had to make a difficult choice. They could silently accept the kidnapping and imprisoning of the sworn acolyte, or they could start an open conflict with one of the great houses. After only 15 minutes of debate, Primus York had convinced everyone to back his preferred course of action. ComStar would take a tough stand and defend itself in the open. The normal step would now have been to copy Toyama's idea and to impose an interdiction on the Combine. But here the Primus disagreed. He suspected that such measures would just lead to defiance and resistance against the wishes of ComStar, and maybe even endanger the life of Mrs. Kurita. It was the presenter Yeron, William Fullerton, who pointed to the most promising course of action. The obsessive code of honor inside the Combine would only allow the yielding under one condition: the use of military force. A complicated matter, because the Order did not field any military of its own. To change that in the shortest possible amount of time, Primus York authorized full payment plus 20% on all open mercenary contacts listed on ComStar's Mercenary Review Board. Overnight, The Order had at its command over 6 battle-hardened regiments, enough to persuade the coordinator that he might be facing an assault on a new front, while he was also at war with his neighbors. The situation improved even further for ComStar when the coordinator decided to allow one of its contracts to run out. The mercenary unit in question was an assault battalion called the Bandersnatchers. Their positioning was in striking distance of Lufyen, and ComStar gladly paid them double the usual rate, gaining a unique opportunity to force the coordinator's hand. York knew that the success of this confrontation depended on his ability to allow Presenter Hendricks to call her shots locally. To do so, he used the Emergency Powers Act of the Communications Protocol of 2787, granting the presenter special command powers to operate independently of Primus or First Circuit. The presenter would use the surprise military presence arriving at Lufyen as a wedge to force the coordinator to surrender Nices. Failing that, the presenter would use whatever force necessary to enforce the will of Blake and ComStar. If she met stiff resistance, ComStar was prepared to initiate its military option against the Combine. Main force of the operation would be the Bandersnatchers, which had all their markings removed and would pose as a completely new military unit under the logo of ComStar. Even the dropships were repainted to match the new identity. The commander of the operation was Presenter Hendricks, who would also use all ROM assets available. Meanwhile, the Primus himself would ready the 6 new regiments and start an approach from Terra to put additional pressure on the Combine. It would be the first military action of ComStar since Operation Silver Shield under Jerome Blake himself. Of course, the preferred outcome would have been a peaceful settlement without the use of force. Presenter Hendricks repeatedly tried to gain an audience with the coordinator, but was flat out rejected every time. It took the complete shutdown of the HBZ station to force him into talks. During this meeting, the presenter requested the release of Nices Kurita and to respect her decision. The coordinator refused. She then used the threat of an interdiction on the full Combine to sway her opponent. He just became defiant and dared ComStar to test his resolve, just as the Primus had suspected. As a last step, she presented Hugai Kurita with a portable holovid. In a direct call, Colonel Dietrichson, commander of the Bandersnatchers, informed the coordinator that his assault battalion was less than 10 minutes from executing a drop on his palace. Their mission was to rescue the presenter and Nices Kurita, and to lay waste to as much of a palace and imperial city as possible before eviction. As an addendum, the presenter also mentioned the army coming from Terra to attack key worlds of the Combine. Without hesitation, the coordinator consented to all the terms proposed. The attack was called off, and the presenter walked away, together with the sister of the coordinator. Within the Combine, the affair was hushed up, and the average citizen never heard about it. But within ComStar, the triumph was widely publicized and celebrated. Primus York had achieved a stunning success for the Order, and its popularity even reached the same levels than that of Blake himself. Nices Kurita and Colonel Dietrichson accompanied him on a grand tour including multiple speeches and parades. They too had gained hero status. And then the next vacancy appeared. Hendrickson was appointed Presenter Dieron, making her a member of the First Circuit. As the events on Lufyen had shown, military force was a mighty tool, even for a more tacit organization like ComStar. And influenced by his success, Primus York made in 2933 a daring proposal to the First Circuit: the formation of a standing military for ComStar. Called the ComStar Guards and Militia, it was planned to be a light, rapid deployment formation that could be used in situations like the affair 2 years prior. The original proposal called for the creation of 8 regiments of infantry, but because of cost reasons, the number was reduced to 5 regiments. All ComStar Guards and Militia would be located in the Sol system and stay under the joint control of the Primus and the First Circuit. The core of the Guards and militia were the former Bandersnatchers. Their contract was dissolved and they accepted to join ComStar. They would have the best equipment possible, vintage Starlink defense gear left behind after the exodus. To fund this military, York reduced the vast budget of ROM, pointing out that ROM would have less need for the money now that ComStar commanded the military force. It also had to give up their training school in the Sandhurst Royal Military College, Berkshire, England. It was to resume its old role as an HQ and training academy for the new forces. Towards the House Lords, ComStar insisted that these troops were exclusively for the defense of Terra and would not be used elsewhere. There was no protest. While extremely popular among the population of Terra and well respected in the whole inner sphere, Primus York was not without opposition inside of ComStar. It were mainly two groups that made things difficult for him. The first one was the First Circuit. York was always criticized for his young age and his reckless nature. But the most severe attack on him was caused by an incredible petty affair. In 2939, he was faced with accusations of having a sexual relation with Carissa Sanders. She was a rather well-known actress of not the best reputation. Their connection made the headlines for some time, and although the Primus denied any deep contact with Miss Sanders, she gave several widely published interviews where she affirmed the accusations. As a result, the presenter orienter, Adrienne Sims, started to openly oppose the Primus. She had already used the debates over funding the new military to gain concessions, and was more or less constantly feuding with York. When the news of the affair broke, the presenter claimed that his actions had soiled the Holy Office and demanded his resignation. In a move that betrayed his cunning, Primus York defused this predicament by simply naming Adrienne Sims his successor. No, she could no longer stick to her demands without appearing power-hungry and ungrateful. The First Circuit was therefore brought in line. The second group of opposition was far more difficult to control. It was ROM, the powerful sword and shield of ComStar. York had appointed his friend, presenter Gilbert, as head of ROM, but this was a dubious choice. Not because Gilbert was disloyal towards the Primus, far from it. The problem was his hostile attitude towards the organization he had to lead and to control. Some of First Circuit even mused that its actual purpose was to completely dismantle ROM, a claim that he himself openly denied. However, it is true that ROM received fewer and fewer resources, and it became increasingly difficult to execute their operations and conduct the required investigations. Soon this weakness became evident to the great houses, and they pounced on the opportunity to improve their own organizations and to damage the dreaded agency even more. In the Federated Suns alone, 6 ROM agents were exposed by the MIIO in the years between 2935 and 2940. Similar incidents occurred within the Free Worlds League and the Capellan Confederation. What hurt ROM the most was Primus York's refusal to answer their calls for help. In his own speeches, the Primus seemed to indicate that ROM was a slipshod organization, often reckless and acting on its own accord, using the word of Blake for justification. The same Primus who had almost pushed ComStar to the brink of war to rescue a lone acolyte was unwilling to lift a finger to help ROM agents in prisons throughout the inner sphere. Finally, in the spring of 2947, Primus York shook ComStar with his proposal to formally do away with ROM, reassigning intelligence gathering and security to the relatively new ComStar Guards and militia. The announcement was made to a full gathering of all presenters on Terra. For the first time, the Primus was making his plans known to the entire Order at once. It was obvious to everyone present that ROM no longer enjoyed support within the leadership of ComStar. Just 2 months later, Primus York visited Sandhurst Royal Military College to participate in its cornerstone laying ceremony. Accompanied by more than half the First Circuit, he held a speech before a crowd composed of ComStar adepts and civilian construction workers. That is, until a series of laser blasts silenced them. The Primus was hit 3 times, the Presenter Rom and Presenter Alpha C were also wounded. York hung onto life for an hour, but even ComStar's advanced medical technology could not save him. An adept named Dutch Courier was identified as the assassin. He was a volunteer for the ComStar Guards and had the task to guard the perimeter. He became suspicious because he had escaped from the scene after the shots. He was later tracked down, but decided to resist arrest. Mortally wounded, he insisted on his own innocence and claimed to know the names of the real perpetrators, yet he did not name them. The question about the investigation, the murder, and the surrounding mystery is still one of the greatest questions in ComStar's history. Sadly, there is an abundance of possible suspects. Was Adrian Sims tired of waiting and decided to hurry the line of succession? Did Rom take revenge? Were the payments Dutch Courier received from the Dacorn's Combine real or a misdirection? Was the Primus slain by a bizarre cabal inside ComStar, as the Combine would subtly claim 130 years later? Or was Dutch Courier a lone gunman who took his shot at immortality? Who knows? 8 days after the death of Primus York, the new Primus, Adrian Sims, announced that instead of dismantling ROM, she would restore funding to the organization and enlarge its scope.